Okay, good morning and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube, just Daf It. Daf Yomi Shir, we're continuing with Nedarim. Today we're doing Daf Yudalid, starting the second parak. We're starting towards the bottom of Yud Gimel Amud Beis. Ve'elu mutar in the Mishnah on Yud Gimel Amud Beis. Ve'elu mutar in Chulin Sha'ochalach. The previous Mishnah mentioned, previous Mishnah has mentioned that if you're matfis b'davar another, if you connect your nether to something which is a davar another, a korban, for example, it becomes aser. Now this Mishnah lists, if you compare your nether to certain things which are not a davar another, davar aser, it's not effective as a nether. Whatever I eat from you should be chulin. Kibasar chazar kavodos kochavim. This loaf of bread, this piece of meat, should be like pork. Kavod kochavim should be like avodah zara. Oros levuvin. Oros levuvin are animals that were sacrifices of avodah zara. They used to actually cut open the skin, the flesh of the animal, and take out the heart of the animal and worship the heart and worship the skin. Kenevelos it's just another type of avodah zara. Kenevelos or treifos. Nevela is an animal which dies without being shechted. Treifa is an animal, even if it's shechted, but it was going to die within 12 months. Kishkatzim v'ramasim are creepy, crawling things that are usher in the Torah. Kechala zaron k'trumaso. Chala zaron, like we said before, refers to the mitzvah of chala. To get blows a manas kahuna k'trumaso. Truma presumably just means truma gdola, that it's the possession of the kohen. Again, all these things are not davar another, davar aser muter. So in all these cases, it does not affect the nether. Omer Ishto, he says to his wife, Harei alai ima, you're usher to me like my mother. Now, a person's usher to his mother, he can't be together with his mother. The Gemara says it's not a nether. Rabbanon, they gave it the chumrah of a nether because it almost sounds like a nether. We'll see it. The Gemara really says talking about for a specific type of person, Ama Aretz, Talmud Chacham. He wouldn't need to be matir the nether. So post Pesach, one of the ways that you're matir a nether, there's two ways basically of being matir a nether, of annulling a nether. One is a charata, where you regret the nether, and one is a Pesach, where you say, if I would have known something, I wouldn't have made a nether. So we advise the Amaretz to be matir his nether as follows, as through a Pesach. The Gemara says, Time Adam or Chulin Sha'ochalach. The first statement in the Mishnah really doesn't belong in this Mishnah. He says, Chulin Sha'ochalach. Ha'amar lechu lachulin Sha'ochalach. It implies it was a lachulin, which means lo chulin sha'ochalach, mashma lo lechulin heavy ala korban. It's not chulin, it's a korban. What I eat from you, which is hadfasa b'davar another. Mani masdisin. Who's our Mishnah? You're a mayor. If he says you're a mayor, halei mikal lava toshamei hain. He doesn't hold, like we said many times. He doesn't infer a law from a hain. So therefore, we can't say lachulin means lo chulin. So it can't be a mayor. Ella Rabbi Yehuda must be Rabbi Yehuda Hainu Reisha. The first week we explained the first Mishnah, which really corresponds with this Mishnah. It's the opposite of this Mishnah. The Mishnah on Yudam Beis. We said that to answer questions over there, the hell Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. So if that Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, this Mishnah is not Rabbi Yehuda. Hainu Reisha, right? It's the same thing. We're going to say, why would we say? Meaning Rabbi Yehuda would be repeating himself in this Mishnah by saying Chulin Sha'ochal, Lach Chulin Sha'ochal, Chulin Sha'ochal, Lach Chulin Mutter. It would be a repetition of the Mishnah on Daf Yudam Beis. So the Gemara says, so the Gemara says really, it said chulin in passing. We were talking about chulin versus korban. So yes, we're talking about a new thing over here: pork, avodas kochavim, avodah zara, which is davar aser, not davar another. Agav orcha, right? In passing, we mentioned chulin, which is not really relevant to the Mishnah. Ravina Amar Haki Yasan. Ravina has a different answer. Right? The reason I brought the word chulin is to tell you that these things are mutter like chulin. Chulin is not consecrated, probably it's not nether. Right? If you compare your nether to pork or lavos kochavim, it's mutter. So the Gemara asks immediately, you needed to tell me chulin, that it's like chulin. If I wouldn't have known that, I would have said you have to actually be matter the nether. Mikal Suki al Daite Haki, could you even teach a thing? Hamid Tani say, if I Omer Ishta, Rea like Ima, Poskin Lo Pesach, in Malcolm Acher, the end of the Mishnah says that if you compare your wife, you want to answer your wife. We'll talk about that more going forward in the Masechta. Another, you could answer your wife on you. So, and you compare your wife to your mother. So you see from the Reisha, right? You don't need to be matir neder even b'darabanan. Elam chavarta chulin memela nasba. So the Gemara says really the first answer is the more correct answer. It says the word chulin in passing. It didn't really need to say the word chulin. Minani mili. How do you know the halacha in our Mishnah, right? If you compare it to pork, you compare it to avodah zarah, which are only davar asr, and davar nadar, the things that the Torah forbade, not that you consecrate it. How do you know it's not a neder? I'm a krah ishki or neder la Hashem. It's a double lashon. Actually, either with davar nadar, until you compare your neder to something which is nadar, something which you obligate upon yourself. A korban is something which you obligate upon yourself, right? When I promised to bring a korban to base on Mikdash, I didn't have that chiyuv before. Right when I was born, I have the chiyuv not, at least when I remember mitzvah, I have the chiyuv not to eat pork or to get hana from avodah zarah. Ihachi, something where it's true. I feel davar aser nam. Even if you compare davar aser, it should also be taksiv. It says later on in the pasuk, "Lesar isar." It's double lashon asar isar, which sounds like the word isar. Al nafsho, esar, right? So it sounds like just like davar hanother, achi davar hanother should be ajdi asar, but davar aser. Likewise, it should also be asar. So the Gemara says, "Lesar isar miboy lech latani ezu isar Torah." The Gemara says that word double lashon is needed for something else. To tell me a brisa that we quoted on Daf It, what's considered the isar amar Torah. A person stands 5 years after his father's patira, and Rashmuel said he made a neder on his father's day of his father's death. He's not going to eat meat or drink wine. And then 5 years later, he says, this day is like my father's yahrzeit, on the same day that his father died. So that works. It takes effect as a neder. Now, what's the chiddush of that halacha? So the Ran says over here, he says the chiddush of that halacha is that hatfasa, really, that's what you're doing. You're connecting your shvuah, it was a shvuah or a neder 5 years later to the actual neder you took 5 years ago. There, it was only a personal neder, right? Most of Masechus Nedarim is when I aser a piece of meat, it becomes aser to everybody. There, it's only a personal neder. How do you know you connect it to a personal neder? It also works. That we know from Lesar Isar, but we do not learn that you can be noder by connecting something to davar aser. There is another way of learning this Gemara over here, right, where the Gemara says Isar is needed for L'Chnetanya. What is the chiddush of that brisa when you connect 5 years later to the day that your father died? There's two explanations, seemingly. One is according to the Ran, and one is according to the Rush. And it's really based on the original Machlokas that we had at the beginning of the Masechta. Could you actually make a neder without using hatfasa, without comparing it to a davar hanother, just saying this, I'm taking neder, hare alai basar, the basar is also me, with a neder, without saying the basar is also like a korban, right? The Ran says, sure, it works. The Rush says, you need hatfasa. I'm going to explain this Gemara according to the Rush. I just gave you the Ran's shot over here. What is this brisa teaching? And I'll relate it back to, according to the Ran, there's actually, Ran agrees, obviously, you can have hatfasa, davar another, like the Gemara says. So there's two types of nedarim. There's a neder where you're matvis and a neder where you're not matvis. What's the practical difference between the two, according to the Ran? Why is there two categories? According to the Rush, there's only one. I'll explain it in Iyun Ben Sion based on this Gemara over here. The Gemara continues, you're ushering me like my mother. Raminhu, Areata like Basrim. A different brisa says, you're ushering me like the flesh of my mother, kabasar achosi, the flesh of my sister. You're also forbidden to be together with your sister. Ka'arla kilaya kerem. Arla is the fruit of the first 3 years. A fruit tree, kilaya kerem, is also asr no. Lomer klum, you didn't say anything. Right? So here it says, one of the cases, basar ima, the Mishnah says you have to, midrabanan, you have to get rid of the neder. You have to annul the neder. To mata the neder with a pesach. Amar Abai, Lomar Klum Midaraisa, Abai says, no, the rice is lavdaf. It doesn't mean Lomar Klum. Midaraisa didn't say anything. Midarabanan, you would need to imata the nether. It's a bechiddush, according to Abai. It would seem that whenever you aser your wife, even if you compare it not just to your mother, but you compare it to Nisra Hana, like Arla and Klaya Kerem, you would need to imata Midarabanan. You made a chumrah by your wife, right? You shouldn't be makel to make nedarim on your wife. It's a serious thing. Rav Amar. Rabbi gives a different answer. Depends if you're Talmud Chacham and Am Aretz. The Mishnah, right, says you need midrabanan to matin. That's of an Am Aretz. Who's someone shaliyaka rosham and nedarim. He's someone that frequently takes nedarim upon himself. Talmud Chacham is very careful. They don't take nedarim upon themselves So when it comes to Talmud Chacham, Lo Amar Klum, right? I would say the opposite. I say Talmud Chachamim are the ones that are being machmer on themselves usually. Mishnah Talmud Chacham, he's always mattering, he's answering his wife. Like Moshe Rabbeinu, right? He separated from his wife. Hashem praised Moshe Rabbeinu for separating from his wife. Miriam spoke Lashon Hara about him. Talmid Chachamim, they separate from their wives. So Talmid Chacham needs to matter neder. They're frequent to take a dharma. They say, I'm Aretz. I mean, if practically thinking about that, I'm Aretz, the businessman, he's not taking a dharma on himself. So he's the one that doesn't need to matter. Actually, who's the one taking the dharma? Talmid Chacham. That's what I would explain the Gemara. Obviously, the Rabbanim, the Mefarshim, who are probably all big Rabbanim, did not say that way. But Tanya, and the Gemara proves that Tanya here is not a question; it's a support. I know there, but Torah lo amar klum. Someone who takes neder from the Torah, we'll discuss this more. This brisa on Yadalat Amud Beis. He didn't say anything. Amar Rabbi Yochanan sarach sheila l'chacham. Nonetheless, you need to be matin and the Rabbanan from a chacham. Amar Rav Nachman u'v'tal mechacham ein sarich sheila. Rav Nachman says that Talmud Chacham doesn't need sheila. Rabbi Yochanan. So now Gemara seems to be saying now like me, right? Talmud Chacham doesn't need sheila. Rabbi Yochanan says sarich sheila. Sarach sheila l'chacham, meaning an am aretz. Previously, that's what they're doing. Rabbi Yochanan is saying am aretz. He needs sheila. The question is, another Torah is not talking about your wife, right? This question is not talking about your wife. So I would say the proof really is another Torah lo amar klum. I don't know Rabbi Yochanan sarach sheila l'chacham. All we're seeing is that Rabbi Yochanan would be arguing on Rav Nachman, maybe. Rabbi Yochanan would be arguing on Rav Nachman and showing that what sarach sheila l'chacham, meaning that Talmud Chacham would need sheila, but Amars wouldn't need sheila. Maybe that's the proof, but it does seem from the Gemara over here that the explanation I gave is wrong. Talmud Chacham doesn't need sheila, and Amars does need sheila. Let's continue. I'm not going to get into vikuach of debating this point over here, but there are ways of interpreting this Gemara to fit in what I said. Tanya, I know there were Torah, lo amar klum. We just discussed this price. I know there were Torah. Someone took a neder to aser a piece of meat like the Torah, and the Torah has Shem Hashem written in it. That's why it brings Torah, because when you write the Shem Hashem, the askaros in the Torah, Yud Kei Vav Kei or Elokim, right? You have to do it l'shema. You have to have kavanah that you're doing it l'shem. So it's like a davar hanodar almost, right? It's a davar hanodar, the askaros. Because before you wrote it, there was no kedusha, and when you write askaros, there's an isser now to be mochek, and you have to have kavanah l'shma. So it's like a davar another. So another Torah lo amar klum. So the first line of the writing says he didn't say anything. If you say I'm taking another what's written in the Torah, darav chayamim, because then apparently you're referring to the askaros, the Shem Hashem. I'm taking another from it, from the Torah, and what's written in there, darav chayamim. So the second and third stanzas in this brisa seemingly say the same thing. So once you already say right? Again, there's two things you could be alluding to: the actual parchment of the Sefer Torah, which has no kedusha necessarily, and the askarot, which is davar another. So once you already say meshakasava, so certainly if you say ba uva meshakasava, certainly. Right, it's us. Why do you have to say the third case? No, the second and third case are talking about two different cases. One case is talking about the Sefer Torah is on the floor. You're not treating it with respect, obviously. Sefer Torah on the floor. Sefer Torah on the floor. I guess only if you drop it. But if you put it on the floor, it's okay. I don't know. You don't have to fast 40 days. So if it's on the floor, you're not treating it with respect. So the Gemara explains. Machzal ara daite agvili. He's not treating with respect. So when he says, Mesha right? That's the second case in the Brisa. Mesha he has to say, the third case is talking about, the third case is talking about where it's on the ground, right? So therefore, you have to say ba of a meshakasava to ensure that ba is going on the parchment, meshakasava is on the skaros. However, it's on the ground. You say the second case of meshakasava. So maybe I would think his mind is also on the parchment, which is not a davar another. Daite agvili nakala biyade daite al skaros. However, he's holding his hand, he's showing with respect. So then it suffices to say a meshakasava. Alternatively, another answer. Really, both cases talking about where it's on the ground. Really, it is superfluous, the third stanza of the Brisa. Both cases are talking about it's on the ground. The Chiddush is that even just saying Meshakasaba, you're not treating with respect. We assume you're talking about the Askaros, we're talking about the holy things. Right? And certainly, if you say Bav Meshakasaba, just for emphasis, that's why it says Zuvein Shaklam Rukasani. Why you say my third answer? Kulam Tziyasa Nami Nakala Biyada. All the second and third cases talking about where he's holding his hand, he's treating with respect. Hakamashman came on the Nakad Lebiyada, Avagav Lam or Ella Ba, Command Arabah Meshakasaba. Dami. The second case is talking about Meshakasaba, which he's treating with respect. He's talking about Askaros. The third case, when he says Ba of Meshakasaba, he actually didn't say Ba of Meshakasaba, he actually said Ba. Right? But since he's holding his hand, so therefore when we interpret Ba as going on Meshakasaba on Askaros, and therefore Dar of Chayamim, he's no der b'davar hanother, which is the Shem Hashem, and therefore it's also. Stay tuned for Ian with Ben Sion, where we're going to discuss how you interpret the Rosh and the Ran in the Gemara and Daf Yud and Aleph to exclude davar aser, and shed some light on the Ran's shita that you can actually have two types of Nedarim. There's a neder of hatfasa and a neder without hatfasa. The Rosh says every neder has to be hatfasa. Seemingly, the Ram makes more sense. We find many cases in the Gemara where the Gemara says hareyat alai, right, without comparing it to a korban, without saying konam or a korban. So the Ram really seems to be a halakha, but it's going to come out. There's two different types of Nedarim. We'll discuss that in Ben Sion coming up next.